Hey everybody, this is Beyond Range, and today we're going to be studying some big blind versus button turn continuation bets. We're facing the continuation bet today, and we've called a flop C bet on the A6-5. And the turn was a king. Our opponent is going to be very polar in this situation. The big blind is going to be floating a lot of the King X region. But they're also going to have a lot of the 6x, a lot of the 5x. There are lots of hands here like Queen 6, Jack 5, this kind of stuff, 6 4, etc. And the big blinds are not going to be floating very many hands on the flop like Queen Jack. A lot of their Queen X, King X is going to be coming from the backdoor flush draw region, and as well as stuff like King Queen, King Jack, etc. Some King 10 might get in there on the flop. So on the turn here, our opponent is betting roughly 125% pot. And what we're going to find is that we're folding a little bit more than half of our range here, right? Our opponent's risking 11.4 into 9.1. The math is slightly more, it's a little bit different than just pure minimum defense frequency, because when our opponent is betting, he's also essentially strengthening our range, and then he's kind of wasting some of his ability to check. So we do a little bit of an overfold sometimes, but not that much. In this situation, when he overbets, our range becomes a lot stronger. So if he has a hand like Queen 9 or Queen 10 or Queen Jack, etc., when we end up calling the turn and he hits a queen or a 9, well, his queen or 9 or 10 or whatever is not going to be very good. Whereas if he checks back the turn, this kind of combo is going to be worth a lot. But basically, the ace-x here is going to have to continue every single time. You're not going to find any ace-x folding in this spot. And on the river, we're not going to have any sort of a lead range, and our opponent gives up with the 9-8. We're on to the next hand. So we've called a small flop continuation bet here. We're facing a turnover bet. Our opponent can be representing hands like overpairs. Our opponent can be representing strong hands like straights and sets and two pairs. And basically, when we check call the flop, we're going to have a lot more marginal combinations, right? Some of our hands like 10-8 or 8-5 or pocket sixes, the nutted region for us would be check raising the flop. So when we're check calling, we're quite a bit weaker. He also can just be sticking in an overbet here with something like ace-9, king-9. Having a 9 is very valuable. Here, this hand on the turn is not efficient to call. If we start calling something like 7-4, we're not range calling because we have lots of hands like ace-jack and even King 10 and Queen 10 and stuff that would be folding, but this is going to be too weak, so we need to fold this hand. Apparently this is getting mixed with a little bit of call, but it's very weak. On the turn here, we've called a flop continuation bet on the King 9-5, and the turn is a king, and our opponent is going with the overbet here. There is probably going to be a touch of call with exactly Queen Jack here. So this actually does have a decent amount of showdown. We're going to be beating some of the Jack 10, the Queen 10. There's a fair amount of just big bet bluff with maybe even some of the weaker Queen X, weaker Jack X, and these will give up the river at some frequency. In addition to that, getting here on the river with Queen Jack when a 10 comes is somewhat valuable. It also sort of stabilizes the weaker bluff catchers in your range, and they're not going to put in as much money, basically, in a sort of weak way. Maybe like a strong King X, they might not just 3x pot all in on the river on a 10 because they know a lot of your continue range is going to end up being Queen Jack, but for the most part we're going to be folding a combination like this. So we are doing about 25% call. I thought we might do less. I thought it would be very small amount. Here we're on the ace ace king, and we called the flop c bet again. The turn is a 6 and our opponent is over betting. So on the flop we're doing a lot of fold against continuation bet. A lot of our range here is going to be weaker pocket pairs, and then a lot of stuff like queen jack, queen 10, jack 10, some suited backdoor queen x, jack x, etc. But we're not even going to be floating any random stuff here. We even something like 10-7 of diamonds on the flop, even though we have a backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, we would be doing a lot of fold. So something like the king jack here is going to be doing a tremendous amount of fold in this situation. Because basically if we are continuing all of our king jack here, we're continuing more than what would make his bluffs indifferent. And it's not only about his bluffs, but then you're also sort of boosting his value. He gets a lot of value by, we're going to take a look at this, because I actually thought that the king jack here would be doing a little bit more fold. That's fine. Yeah, we'll continue. I don't want to take like 10 minutes looking at this spot. I want these videos to flow a little bit easier, but it's a very similar situation here, right? So we've called the flop continuation bet. Now we're facing a turn over bet. And what we're going to find is that, again, if we're continuing all these kind of hands like pocket fives, pocket sixes, we're going to be a little bit wide here, because we're going to have a lot of hands like 6-4, like 5-3. We're going to have a whole bunch of backdoor flush draw diamonds. A lot of our backdoor flush draws will come off of the 10 of diamonds, but we're still going to have plenty of these. In addition to that, we have a fair amount of 10x, not incredible amounts of 10x, but ace 10 would be a pure call on the flop. There can also maybe even be a touch of something like king 10. You can have some 10x backdoors, again, from your spades and your hearts. And then you're going to have, again, some pair plus draw, stuff like 7-6. You'll be calling a7, jack 7. See, our opponent can be value betting a 7 in this situation. Having a 7 is very valuable. In addition to that, just having a 7 when our opponent is going to be bluffing a lot of stuff like 5x and 6x means that your pair will be stable. Means that he won't sort of hit you on the river with, let's say he has a6 and the river's a 6. Well, now he's beating you. Your fives, this kind of 7x has more equity, but I think you need to be calling some amount of these or you're really overfolding the turn, but you're going to mostly have to fold these on the turn. And again, we're in another situation where we're facing turnover bet and we have a pretty weak hand in our range, right? We're going to have a lot of 9x here. We're going to have a fair amount of 7x, but not tons of 7x. A lot of our 7x would be coming from the suited backdoor 7x and then the straight draw 7x. Something like king 3 here is basically going to have to fold. It's just more efficient to be folding. So apparently we're doing a decent amount of call here with king 3. And it might have a little bit to do with just how often we're improving on a king river specifically. You might find that like king 3, queen 3 might actually be more efficient call than ace 3 or something like that, thinking about what rivers you're actually making two pairs on and what they're able to value bet efficiently, but not a particularly strong hand in this situation. And the 9-8 here is going to have to fold against the turnover bet again, right? So we have a lot of queen x, we have a fair amount of 7x, and a lot of the 7x is going to be indifferent here in this situation. Your opponent's going to be over betting stuff like ace x of diamonds, some king x of diamonds. He'll even be able to overbet something like queen jack of diamonds, some jack x of diamonds, 10x of diamonds. So your 9-8 of diamonds calling on the turn out of position. Oh, you do have the gut shot actually, for what it's worth. I didn't realize that. I just thought we had a 9 high flush draw. I didn't realize that the 5 made it so that if you hit a 6, I don't think you can fold this actually, but maybe apparently you're maybe playing a bunch of for ace and then river. We should be leading very small, apparently like 9% pot on the 7, because basically our opponent is going to be betting on the turn with a lot of stuff like king queen, ace queen, even some queen jack. His 7x of diamonds are very efficient to play turn check. He kind of wastes his hand if he starts over betting 7x of diamonds. Whereas we on the turn, the 5 doesn't really improve either of our ranges, so in order to meet the minimum defense, we're going to have a lot more of the 7x region, so developing a river lead makes a decent bit of sense in this spot, being able to kind of set the price and eke out a little bit more EV versus his range. Could go deeper, but yeah, I didn't actually even consider the river lead because I just saw non-diamond check, which is a mistake from me. A little bit kind of autopilot clicking here. Because I honestly didn't realize that I was kind of confused about the hand on the turn. And yeah, but okay, so we're on the turn here with king 8. King 8 is kind of an interesting 8x here because you do have overcards to stuff like 10s, jacks. I know these hands wouldn't generally be overbetting on the turn, but if you just think about your most efficient 8x, this is one of your more efficient 8x. In addition to that, you kind of need to be calling some amount here, but I think you're probably mostly going to need to be folding against this sizing. I think you're still just forced to fold a lot, basically. So we'll do a few more hands here. The flop is 10-9 deuce, and then the turn is a jack, right? We've called the flop bet. The turn comes a jack. We're doing pretty well on this card for what it's worth. We're going to have a lot of stuff like king queen, king jack, queen jack, jack 9, jack 10. We have even backdoor diamonds from the ace x, the king x of diamonds here. It's an interesting spot. So I think a hand like even ace 10 here, ace 9 would be doing a lot of fold. Because you have all these other hands that are more efficient to choose from. Something like king 10 would end up making a straight on a queen. Something like king 9 would be making a straight on a queen. So it's pretty easy to overcall the turn here. I think again 9-8 is having an open-ended straight draw. But it's bottom pair, but then you also make a fair amount of flush draws on this turn for what it's worth. Like you have a lot of king x, queen x, ace x of diamonds on this turn. I think if you're calling 9-8 here, this is probably like the threshold hand, but you might be overcalling the turn if you're like calling it a lot. I don't know exactly how much of an overcall, but it feels like, okay, so you need to really fold it, which is very surprising to me. I honestly thought that you would call it a little bit, but just probably fold it more often than not. Apparently I'm incorrect. You're just like folding it a ton. So I didn't realize and just how well we're interacting with this jack and just how we're probably going to way overput money in if we're continuing too wide here in this situation. So we've called a flop bet, and the turn is an ace on the ace, jack, jack, ace. Kind of an interesting situation here on the turn. I'm not sure about if we were developing leads or not on the turn, but we have a lot of, I think we would probably develop a lot of leads on this turn for what it's worth. So we are, not that it really matters a lot, because when we basically weaken our check range, then our opponent's betting range is able to be wider, it's still gonna be balanced. It's just some small stuff to consider, because even if you're leading a bunch of ace-x, you're also leading like your pocket pairs that now are kind of getting counterfeit, some of your king high, some stuff like that. I think holding a queen as well and holding a king, like you're just doing a very good job of unblocking a lot of stuff that's bluffing, and he wouldn't be bluffing very often with this region, so I think you just probably need to mostly call. But I could be wrong, because maybe you are like, he just has too many ace-x and jack-x, and at this point you just need to find enough folds. But it feels like when you're looking at your king-x region, this would be top tier king X, so it seems like you probably just need to call mostly, but apparently we're only calling half of the time. So we're actually folding more often than I thought again, which is interesting. So we're going to wrap up this after this hand, guys. This is Beyond Range. I love you, and we'll see you next time.